First of all, I'm so happy to see so many of you here this evening. You're really going to enjoy yourselves, I believe. And we're so happy to be able to present this, the Historical Museum and the Friends of the Library. And the first thing we're going to do this evening is start off with a presentation from John to the Friends of the Library, and Cindy Ansell is here to represent the Friends.
That's right.
Okay?
You want me to come down there?
It's not a huge presentation, but you know, I grew up in Florida. I grew up in Lake Worth. Went to Lake Worth High School, class of '67. It's so great to see people who graduated here. I've got a friend who was in a band with me, played music with me, and he's not going to tell any of the secrets tonight. And happy to see Ted Brownstein, who wrote this book, Pioneers of Jewel, which was very inspiring about the history of Lake Worth, and we had a chance to talk, and I'm very privileged and pleased that you're here tonight, and all of you. And meeting Judy Reed, who's a volunteer with the museum upstairs. I first saw the museum last year, and I said, wow, no, do people know about this? Do you know about this? If you haven't, you got to get up to see the museum. We should have opened it tonight, you know, we should have a special viewing. But if you haven't seen it, it's great. And I'm a professional videographer, a documentarian. I live at the Jersey Shore. And my dad is from the Jersey Shore. My mom's from Racine. They're 90. They're here tonight. My mother turned 90 on March 1st, just last week. So when I come down and see them 3 or 4 or 5 times a year to visit and help do errands and fix that damn doorbell that never seems to get fixed, I sometimes get a little bored watching Judge Judy, so I like to get out and videotape and do things and tell stories. So I've committed to the library and the Historical Society and the Friends of the Friends of the Library that I'm a long-term asset for you, and I like coming down here and telling stories with my video. I have a television show back in New Jersey I do every week. And my cousin, Ginger, who's right there, is wearing a typical African garb, I think. She's our family historian, and she's kept Africa U.S.A. alive, and I love her for that. She's got a website, AfricaUSA.com, which you have to go visit as well, so I appreciate it. You'll meet the whole family. But I did a video, a documentary, I've done a few down here, a 60-minute interactive video about Lake Worth and about the history. And I said whatever money we make, we'll give to the Friends of the Library to sort of earmark it for the Historical Society. And I had a discussion with Vicki Jocelyn the other day about strategically what do we want to do. And I said I would like to, with your permission, as Friends of the Library, and you guys can talk about it, I would like this to be the first payment toward trying to get audiovisual upstairs, so that people can see the history and see the things. So this is just a little check for $300. Wow. More coming. And there's some information about Friends of the Library here. And there's also a little donation basket at the end of the show. If you have $100 or $1,000, you can come in, or you have a few dollars.
Or you'd like to join the Friends of the Library. We just happen to have the membership cards to fill out tonight. That's right.
Just throw it into the basket.
Yes.
Can I introduce you, or do you want to say a few more things?
Say a couple things.
Oh, you go right ahead.
First of all, if you've not had a chance to see the video, I suggest get a copy. It's done in a very fun style, basically. Can you see it? You'll have to excuse, that's the one I believe was an interview with me on, isn't it?
Some of it. There's the one with you is the history of Lake Worth. The 60-minute one is, I explore every inch of Lake Worth, the way it used to be and the way you saw it.
Yes.
It's $14. If you give me your address, I'll have a sign up. It's $14, I'll send you a copy.
It's wonderful.
And all the proceeds go to the Friends of the Library.
You'll see a lot of things that you remember from many years back in that video. And if you get a chance to see the promo that he did for the museum upstairs, it's online. It's done in a very fun style, very enthusiastic, and we thank you a million for
My
that.
pleasure.
Whereas this evening we're here with 2 delightful people, and I'm going to introduce Ginger Pederson, who's going to take care of the introductions from here on. This is on Africa U.S.A., something that I hope someone had a chance to visit when it was here.
All Well, first, I want to introduce someone very special. And this is my aunt, Shirley Schneider. She had actually working at Africa U.S.A. and it was founded by her parents, her father, John Pederson, and her mother, Lillian Pederson. And my father, who's not with us anymore, unfortunately, was also a key player. It was a wild animal park like America had never seen. It was located on 300 acres in Boca Raton. And as I tell everybody, if we still had those 300 acres in Boca Raton, I would be joining you tonight via Skype from my Tahitian island. But unfortunately, it was sold. And so I don't even know if my grandfather would have, I think he would turn over in his grave if he knew how much that land would be worth today. But it was an amazing place because you were within the animals, and you'll see a little bit of this. But we're going to show like a really short 1-minute video to just give you a flavor because we have some great color film that has survived the 60 years. So this is a 1-minute video, and then we'll start our little presentation.
You think we should turn the lights off?
No, it's good. And so, this is John Pederson as a young man with his family. His father's name was Peter Pederson. I mean, they were really creative with names. And the rest of my aunts and uncles. And so tell them a little bit about Racine, Wisconsin.
All right. I always like to say something about my father because he was so unusual. He was born in Wisconsin in a family of 11, and they were very poor. They had to put paper in the soles of their shoes to keep warm. They caught birds when they wanted meat. And it just was a sad, sad life that he was that poor. But I'm getting old. I'm not a formal speaker. I'm just an old lady of 90 that experienced all this and really loved it. It was wonderful. I wanted to tell you that he had to quit school at the age of, what was it, 12 or something like that? He was in 5th grade. And he had to quit school to work in a factory to help support his family. And he was very upset because he really wanted to have an education so bad. So what did he do? He went to the library at night after he finished working. He'd go weekends. And he learned so much from the library that he was amazed more people didn't go there. He said that you could read any topic you wanted to and they were right up to date and it didn't cost you anything. He thought that was marvelous and he learned so many things at the library. And of course he took us kids when he married and had kids. And I'd sit there with a big book about Einstein, and my brother would sit there with a big book about Edison, and my dad would go. And what he didn't know was we had a funny book, a comic book. Which was really bad because who did we hurt? Ourselves. We didn't get educated. We should have done what he did. So when he got older, he had 3 goals in his life that he wanted to do. And you're going to notice that I say he will do it. He's not that I hope to do it, he said, I am going to do it. And the first one was, he wanted to find a place somewhere in the United States that looked like Africa. And he wanted to let animals loose so we could see them in their natural state and how happy for the animals to be out loose. And he told people this, and they said, crazy John. He didn't care if anybody laughed at him. He knew what he wanted in life. His second goal was, he said, I'm going to become a millionaire. They laughed, they said, we're poor. You can't, how are you going to be a millionaire? Rockefeller's the only millionaire. He said, I'm telling you, I'm going to be a millionaire. And his third wish was, he wanted to live to be 100. And the men all said to him, you know the lifespan of a man is only 47 years. I'm going to live to be 100. So he went to the library again and he studied and studied and found a state that had everything he wanted in it. Weather, forests, savannas, and that was Florida. And he read up on everything about Florida and he said, I don't understand why people aren't down there. And he saw the future. He knew that someday that was going to be great. He also believed that when you worked, if you had one job, you lived like everybody else. If you had 2 jobs, you could get ahead. So that's what he did. He had 2 jobs most of his life. He worked very, very hard. He did a lot of things to earn this money before he went to Florida. But we can't get into them because we'd be here all night, and I know you don't want to be here all night. But he did accomplish a lot of goals in his life. Then we went to Florida. And Ginger's father and my mother rode around trying to find land that would suit my dad for all these animals to be released on. And they found it in Boca Raton, Florida. Right in the city limits across from the fabulous Boca Raton Club. He got the land, he bought 350 acres for $25 an acre. There was a big canal on the one side that went all the way to the ocean. He put up 2 fences on the property to keep the animals in. And he did something else that he had read in the library that many people in Florida didn't know. That the water table in southern Florida was so high, you could dig a lake, a river, or a canal anywhere and hit water, fresh water. So out where the animals were going to be, he dug lakes, he dug rivers, and he dug canals, so that not only could they have their water, they could wash and play in it. I'm really getting confused.
That's okay. Why don't you take a break? A lot of people ask, where did we get the animals from? My dad actually went to Africa, this is him here, and purchased the animals. Some of them were actually caught wild from preserves. And from that, they were put aboard this ship that was called the African Planet. So he actually was a shipmate on board, and they had these crates that had the zebras on them, and the crates that held the ostrich actually had to be rebuilt during the voyage because the ostrich were growing. This is a picture that was recently sent to me by one of the men that helped my dad, who now lives in Australia, and these are the 2 cheetahs, Moja and Mbili, as kittens, as cubs. Their mother had been killed by a truck, and so they raised them along with their dog, and so they were very tame. Now, this is a book that my dad never wrote, but he always said, if I'm going to write a book, it's going to be called I Shoveled You Know What Across the Atlantic. So I made him a fake book cover, because he always said he was going to write this book. And so that's how it would look if he actually had ever written it. So here he is landing at Port Everglades with my grandfather here in attendance as my dad. As he was quoted in the paper, he said, the first thing I want is a hamburger. He had, been having a rather wild food in Africa. And these are the 2 cheetahs then all grown up. And here's grandfather in the well. He had dug this well way deep down, and all that equipment, all of the pumps and that is still below the guardhouse in Camino Gardens in Boca Raton. They just left everything, it's probably all rusted to nothing. But he had dug this well directly into the aquifer, and he had lots of beautiful, fresh, cold water that came up. This is one of the billboards that dotted all along US 1, when that was before the turnpike, before I-95, The only way to get to South Florida was either US 1 or you went on the west coast, down Highway 41 and across the Tamiami Trail, but most people came right down US 1, and there was hundreds of these billboards. The only picture that I've ever seen of one of the billboards. This must be 194 miles, so it must be somewhere south of Jacksonville. And this were the entrance gates as you went in here on this particular driveway. That's my grandfather and one of the natives. My father had bought these costumes in Africa. They were authentic. And he dressed the locals in them. That was part of one of their jobs, was to do that. And tell them the story of the one who the kids at least thought spoke Swahili.
He was a man that was in the service in Japan, so he could speak Japanese. And when the kids would come in, they'd see this pot of boiling water, and they'd see the hut that he lived in and all. And then he would start saying, in Japanese. And one day somebody answered him. And he wouldn't tell my dad what he had said. I have to tell you something about that geyser. Engineers told my dad it was impossible to do that, to have that water go up 160 feet into the air. And my dad said, watch me. I went to the library and I had studied all what to do. And on the land, he had a hill that was 40 feet above sea level. He dug down 2 stories to put all these pressure machines to put it up. And he did get it up. And everybody was amazed that he could do that. Now, he knew one thing that he had read in the library, too, that a lot of people in Florida didn't know. And that was about the water table. I told you that. So he's in the gardens. He took 35 acres of land in the gardens. And it was the largest tropical plant life and zoological garden in the United States. His place was the largest private zoo in the United States. And in the garden, he planted every kind of plant you could think of. And he always thought about children. He let children go through on the school bus because he thought they would see things they had never seen before and would never see again. He had ginger. He had coffee plants. He had tea plants. He had 1,000 banana trees, sausage trees, and he had over 50,000 plants that bloomed like bougainvillea. It was absolutely spectacular. He had the geyser. He had the lake in the middle with an island he built, and he put monkeys on that, called it Monkey Island. And the boat ride was 35 cents. And when you went through the gardens and you got out to the lake, you were very fortunate if you were there when the geyser went off. He had to go off every hour and 4 minutes like Old Faithful. And it was quite thrilling. He mainly put this garden in for people that had come there and couldn't afford to go out to see the animals, or they had brought friends there and they didn't want to go through again because it would cost them too much. So he put the gardens in free, and he put chickens that would run around that the kids could chase, and he had these waterfalls that he put in with that were the largest in Florida. He loved doing things like this that were free, because when he was a child, he couldn't see things that he really wanted to see, and he figured if some kids were disappointed, at least they could be in the gardens and see all of this. Up in front, he had the 2 cheetahs, and he let you pose with them for pictures, and sometimes he would let a child put their hand out and let the mobili lick it, and they would scream because the tongue was like sandpaper, very unusual. They also had a baby chimp that was the smallest one ever brought into this country. And they named her Princess Margaret. And they had a playpen out in front with her toys, and she used to sit out there. She learned how to crawl. She learned how to walk. My dad taught her to ride a bicycle, to roller skate, to kiss people on the cheek, and smile for a picture. They did all this for her. She loved people. And there was one person that especially loved her. And are you all familiar with Anheuser and Busch? Well, Gussie Busch would come down. He had a suite over at the famous Boca Raton Club. And he'd always call up and say, would you bring my little Princess Margaret over? And we'd say yes. And my mother would put an organdy dress on her, a big organdy bow on her, her little white socks, her little white shoes, and we'd take her over. Now, she didn't know when she first got in the hotel who it was gonna be, but as soon as she got to the door of the suite, she would jump up and down and scream and everything. She was so excited. And when they opened the door, she'd run over to him, put her arms around his neck and kiss him. He played with her for an hour, and he just adored her so much. He said to my father, "I'll give you any price for this baby." And my dad said, "No, that's my little girl. I wouldn't sell her for that." So then just before they would leave to bring Margaret back, he would have ice cream and cookies. And they'd sit down and they'd eat ice cream and cookies. And when Margaret would spill a little on her, he'd say, "You spilled something, Margaret." She'd take her napkin and wipe it. And then he would drool ice cream out of his mouth. Now, we didn't know if it was natural, but we sort of thought that he did it because he knew what she was going to do. She picked up his napkin and wiped his mouth. And he said, "Thank you, Margaret." And she gave him a big smile. She was so happy. Then she had to go. And he hated for her to leave. He just adored her so much. Everybody did. She was such a little doll. A lot of people think that, well, I'll tell you first. She waved bye-bye to him and blew him a kiss. She was really adorable. A lot of people think that chimps have bugs and fleas. They don't. They're a lot like us. Not as hairy, but I mean they're... So my mother they raised her like their own child. My mother would give her a bath every day. And she taught Margaret when she had to go to the bathroom, you go into the bathroom, pull down your pants, sit on the potty chair, and flush it. She had a little flusher thing on it. And then go wash your hands. And she did that.
Wow.
We used to take her down to Fort Lauderdale. She loved that. Because in those days, the restaurants would let you come in with her. And she'd sit in her high chair and she'd eat and be quiet. And when we put her in a buggy and stroll her down the street, you know how people like to look at babies. Oh, what a cute... They see this black hair and they see with his big eyes. It's so exciting. Well, Margaret was alarmed at first, but she got used to the screams and she enjoyed it very, very much. So, I was going to tell you something else he discovered. My dad discovered so many things by going to the library. He wondered why the kids of today don't do that, find out what you're really interested in, and be determined you're going to do it. Because movie stars weren't movie stars. In fact, they were ashamed of the first movies they made. And it wasn't until they practiced and practiced and practiced that they became stars. All right, now we're ready to go down to Africa, U.S.A. How many of you have ever heard of Africa, U.S.A.?
How many have been there?
How many of you?
Oh, a couple.
That's
This is-
unusual too.
This is an aerial photo from 1953, which will kind of show you the landmarks that are there. This was the parking lot, this was the driveway in. So that sign you saw was right about here as you entered in from the Dixie Highway. This was the Monkey Island. This little dot here, if you can see it, is the geyser base. So you would enter, the bridge was right here, so you would catch your tram here, drive around, and there's actually still crumbling asphalt that you can walk on in Camino Gardens. The asphalt is still here and crumbles. Then you would go here, this was the little bridge, and then you would go through the trails where the animals would be. And so this was taken right as Africa, USA was being opened in 1953. Would you like to see how it looks today? This, I warn you, this picture is frightening. Here it is. So,
Imagine that.
1953 and today. This is the Camino Gardens development, is all these white houses and then other things. This is Monkey Island. There's a small apartment complex right here. And in the lagoon, you can still, at low tide, see the geyser base. The little cement, it's the only physical remnant that's actually still there from the park. So this is a close-up of the building. This is the parking lot again, the administration building where you would get your tickets, view exhibits, and have a hot dog or hamburger or whatever they serve. And here's a close-up. You can see the island is not even grown in yet because that was just as the park had opened. This is another view of the famous geyser, and you can see it here in action. And Monkey Island, you can see they were still growing crops in that area. This is, of course, all houses now today as well. So here is this, just look at this lady here. See her?
Oh,
This is my
I was
father.
17.
This is a 47 Hudson. I put this up on the internet so someone would identify the car. It's a 47 Hudson. This is you-know-who, Margaret. In the middle, my grandfather, my grandmother. And this is my grandfather with the cheetahs. So this was from your Wilton Manor days. He bought a lot of land at tax sales in Wilton Manors. It was a failed development of boom time. And he built stores and little houses. And tell them about the chicken coops.
Well, actually, I wasn't going to tell you all that, but
The
it's a
chicken
long
coops
time,
are
but
good.
I will. He made a lot of money to buy this land and the animals, of course. A lot of people at the end say to me, where did he get the money? Well, again, he went to the library, and they had pamphlets on the table, and they took one, and it said, in Fort Lauderdale, they're going to have a tax sale on the courthouse steps. So he went around and looked at property, and that's another thing. He was a great American. He said that the greatest thing you could own was land. That was the greatest thing, and if you were an American, you could do anything or be anything you wanted to be. He truly believed that. You should see us now. So anyway, what was I talking about?
The chicken coops.
Chickens.
Chicken.
Oh, so he went to the courthouse steps, and he bid on land that was taken back for taxes. He found that he bought a house with land for $5. He bought almost all the land along New River. He bought the land all around the Federal Highway in Fort Lauderdale. He had so much land he didn't know. In Wilton Manors, what she's talking about, he bought almost all the land in the city. And today he still holds the record of having the most land bought by a civilian. Oh, he didn't buy any land in the ocean. Now, he should have known this because he went to the library all the time. The ocean lots were selling for $10 and $15 each. And being a farmer from Wisconsin, he didn't want to do it because he had read about how when hurricanes come, they wash all the sand away. Can you imagine buying lots for 10 and 15? People laughed at him when he was buying this stuff. They said, "You crazy." He said, "Why am I crazy? They took this land, they own it, and the governor is signing them off to you. I'm buying it." And he bought them all and did very good. He was very happy that he had done that. So he sold a lot of them and put up Africa, U.S.A. Now, as we go on our safari ride, we go through Tanyiki territory, over the bridge in, and you saw all those natives that were dancing. They danced and entertained the kids. And they had a man that was in a Jeep. Always was a black man, because they really loved this kind of work. Not because they were black, but they loved being in with the animals and all. And he'd be ahead of the train that would go in with all these people on it. And he would chase out all the animals from the forest area where the palm trees were to get them out to Savannah so people could see them. And you would see the largest herds